Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 24th of July, 2024. In fact, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Charles Mallet. Welcome to the programme, Charles.
Thanks very much, Mike.
And by video link from Damascus, Vanessa Beeley. We're going to get kicked off with digital ID. And well, this article in the Times has been motivating quite a lot of people on social media. And so on, the headline is government-backed digital IDs to let people open bank accounts. The verification technology will let people use one method for everything from paying tax and buying alcohol to opening a bank account. And of course, as you might expect, the thrust of this article is convenience. It's all about the convenience of it and so on. But, you know, frankly, anybody that's been paying attention shouldn't be surprised that, in fact, Keir Starmer, who ran his campaign on changes, we've mentioned this several times, there's no change here at all. So let's just look at how there's no change, because if we go back to the King's speech in November 2023, well, this was a graphic we showed at the time, the main points of it, and close to the bottom there we've got Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, and the Tories were talking about being able to export data abroad. They were talking about a whole host of different supposedly data protection related things. But if we put that back on screen, we'll look at the new name for it, because it's exactly the same. It's now called the Digital Information and Smart Data Bill. This was in the King's speech just last week. So this is the new name for it, and it's pretty much dealing with the same sort of situation. So, but they are talking, there is one new aspect to this. They're talking about a new National Underground Asset Register that will give planners and excavators access to data. Now, this is interesting because this is something that Debbie's been talking about in recent weeks, the fact that the water companies don't have a clue where their underground infrastructure is. And then it also is talking about smart data schemes, which will allow sharing of customer data with authorized third-party providers. And this is key, particularly with medical information and so on, and as they develop the DNA databases, this is key. But if we look at digital identity itself, and just remind ourselves what this looked like under the previous government's documentation, and this won't have changed. One type of digital identity, they said, which could be developed under the trust framework, is similar to a wallet, but created securely on your device. It lets you store various trusted pieces of information about yourself. We call these pieces of personal information attributes, and you can choose when and with whom you share them, but probably never your whole wallet of information. And on the right-hand side there, you can see the graphic that they included, which includes things like your age, your qualifications, whether you've got a driving license, where you're resident, whether you're a pensioner or not, whether you're qualified to work in the country or not. This could include disclosing details from the government, they said, such as your legal name, date of birth, right to reside, to work or to study, as well as details from other organisations, such as your professional qualifications or employment history. And so this is, of course, not going to be run by the government themselves, but it's going to be run by private sector organisations. This is another public-private partnership here, and a whole host of organisations queuing up to get involved. So here's one, Digital ID, and let's look at another one, the Post Office. Now, bearing in mind what's going on with the inquiry into the Horizon IT scandal, is anybody likely to use the Post Office to provide a digital ID service, even if you were in agreement that this was a good idea? I don't think so. And then, of course, we've got Yoti. And Yoti is particularly interesting because this is already something which is being sold heavily to the younger generations in order to get ID for entering pubs, clubs and so on. But the Yoti CitizenCard has got to be well up on the in terms of the likelihood of them being chosen for the final contract. Maybe quite a number of these will be chosen at the end of the day, and there'll be some competition in the market. It's not just in the UK, of course, because this is a global agenda, as we all know, and the EU talking about exactly the same thing, a digital ID and personal digital wallet for EU citizens, residents and businesses. It makes all kinds of things possible, according to the EU, and of course, what the story that's coming from the British government and from most people that are commentating on this from the establishment side are saying, of course, this will never be mandatory. You'll still be able to do things without digital ID. But I think anybody that's been paying attention over the last number of years knows that they will make life very, very difficult for anybody that wants to continue to do things the old way. And I mean, one example of that is HMRC and their claims that they will maintain their telephone lines for people that want to use traditional methods of communication. But in fact, they have systematically increased the wait times on their telephone service to make it so unpleasant and impossible for people to use it, that they're forced into the digital way of doing things. And of course, it's not mandatory, except it sort of is, because here's gov.uk and their one login system. And the idea of this is that you have a single login for every government service that you might use. And we shouldn't forget to mention online safety, because this is, of course, justifying digital ID checks, because if children have to be protected from online pornography, then of course you've got to be able to identify the person who's visiting your porn website. And that means you've got to be able to identify what age they are. They've got to be able to identify who they are. So this graphic from Ofcom saying children first see online porn at age 13 on average. 10% have seen it by age 9. 79% have seen violent porn by the age of 18. And so age assurance checks might include photo ID matching, facial age estimation, credit card checks, and the next one is digital identity wallets, which is exactly what we're talking about. So just to remind everybody what the government's position was on this, here is their comments from their FAQ. This is the previous government, of course. I'm sure the new government will update this and it won't look any different to the old one. But anyway, the claim that the UK government at the time was making was that or at least the claim that people were making about the UK government was that the government was creating a mandatory ID card. The UK government at the time said the proposed legislation does not include any proposal to create either a digital or physical ID card. The government is committed to making it as easy as possible for people to prove who they are online and access the services they need without creating mandatory ID cards. But as we've just, the point I've just made is that it will be effectively mandatory because it'll be so difficult for people to get access to services without it, that although they claim it won't be mandatory, in practice it will be. So we're saying that that's at the very least misleading. The next claim that they were worried about on the internet is that this will make it easier for hackers to get hold of people's data. And the fact that they were claiming was that cybersecurity is a critical priority for the government, that the government recognises how important it is to protect users and their data and have robust measures in place to ensure the security and integrity of online government services and systems, which is pretty ironic, bearing in mind the consistent efforts that the government has made to make it easy for hackers to get access to data and to publish it online, as we saw recently with the NHS hack in London and millions of records appearing online as a result. So we're going to say at the very least, this is misleading. And finally, then, the claim that sharing data in this way will erode my privacy rights, and the government then claiming that this is not true because the government has stringent data protection processes in place. All data sharing is compliant with data protection legislation and guidance published by the Information Commissioner's Office. This will remain the case for any and all data sharing subsequent to the proposed legislation, which is why they're completely reorganising the Information Commissioner's Office. They were under the previous legislation. They will continue to do so under this legislation. And part and parcel of this will be the ability for companies to export that data to other countries. So again, we're saying that at the very least, this is misleading. No change, because it's just continuation with the agenda that we were seeing up until now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the vulnerability of the groups that are already targeted, exactly like you say, with the youth who were specifically on the Yoti front for access to cinemas, they said, in 2020, when people were finally allowed to go out of their houses. And of course, the other thing, for the government to try and offer any kind of guarantee when everything is being conducted by third parties is absurd.
Yes.